Chapter 921, Transcendence, 1. Day 45 since entering the labyrinth. We're currently on Faron Island. After all, the Berserk raid ended a long time ago, and we had already thoroughly searched Lemia Island where the Imperial Army had been stationed. The time has come to deal with the second target for the true ending, but he still hasn't come? No contact either. No, we haven't heard any news yet. The problem, unfortunately, was that target was still absent even at this point. Since Leviathan's invasion of Lemia Island was only a few days later, I figured he'd already be here by this point. Does he not arrive until that day? Perhaps that might be the case, but the thought also crossed my mind that he might not show up at all until day 60, when the labyrinth closes. After all, even in my last round, I never directly encountered Storm Gush, Tisk, of course. Just because the second target doesn't show up doesn't mean the plan is completely ruined. We've already crushed the Imperial Army. On top of that, I'm confident that if we can also take down the third target, we'll earn a sufficiently high score. But it just doesn't sit right with me. After all, what kind of bastard is that Storm Gush? In a way, from Teshi's perspective, he's even worse than the Imperial Army. But can a world line where a bastard like that lives on unscathed really be called a true ending? At the very least, I couldn't accept it. Well, whether I accept it or not, there wasn't much else I could do, other than wait endlessly. But did you really defeat the Imperial Army? Is there a problem with that? And no. Of course not. Was it because she'd heard we already crushed the Imperial Army? The Siren Queen, who could be called the village's second-in-command, had lost all will to resist in her eyes. It was as if she was treating us like a natural disaster. It just felt like she was hoping for the storm to pass quickly. Now, I know it's personal maintenance time, but don't get too relaxed. This is a new area, isn't it? If you call yourself an explorer, you should be using this time to do even one more search. Fine, it's not like there's anything else to do. If I find that Storm Gush, will that count toward my contribution? There's an essence among the spoils that I want. The time spent waiting passed fairly quickly. The members, unable to bear the boredom, roamed all over Faron Island, which had already been fully searched, and I spoke with Teshi and the Queen to check if there was any information we might have missed. And, day 48 since entering the labyrinth, it's the Storm Gush. At last, the bastard revealed himself. Maybe revealed himself isn't quite the right way to put it. When the Beastmen group freely searching Faron Island first spotted him, apparently the bastard had seen the village occupied by humans and was turning tail to flee. For the record, there was no Storm Gush raid or anything like that. Suppression complete, bringing it to the village now. By the time I confirmed the news, the members who had swarmed in like a swarm of bees had already subdued him, and after waiting at the village for a bit, I was finally able to come face to face with the bastard. Mulan, who on earth are these people? Do something. The bastard, with his four limbs restrained by melee-type explorers, screamed something at the Queen, and the Queen, seeming uncomfortable with the situation, glanced at me to gauge my reaction. But perhaps he took that as betrayal? You wretched wench, he will be coming soon. And yet you couldn't endure even that long and went and latched onto the humans. Watching him struggle even harder and shriek at the top of his lungs, I could roughly tell what type he was. Don't say anything to her. We're not the Imperial Army. And if you can see the state of this village and still call it betrayal, do you have a problem with your intelligence? The bastard clamped his mouth shut, as if he didn't even want to exchange words with a human like me. Of course, that wasn't particularly a problem. The means of conversation doesn't necessarily have to be words. Street stop. I'll talk. What do you want from me? A trivial act of defiance that ended with Aner catching my signal, giving him a poke in the side with her spear. Watching this, I somehow felt indignant on Teshi's behalf. To think Teshi's life was ruined because of a pathetic bastard like this. I didn't even want to have a long conversation with him. Well, as for what we want, you can hear directly from the person themselves. Tetrajia. As soon as words dropped, Teshi, who had been hiding behind the members, stepped forward. I didn't quite like how he seemed somewhat intimidated even though the bastard's limbs were restrained, but yeah, I suppose that part can't be helped. It's you. So you're the one who latched onto these humans. You ungrateful wretch. Silence. If you have something you want to say, say it. This is the bastard who destroyed your life, so you're not going to tell me you've got nothing to say, are you? After shutting the Storm Gush up, I stood next to Teshi and gave him a bump on the shoulder, intending to encourage him. But then, what was this? I don't want to. What? It was a completely unexpected answer. Honestly, it's not that I had nothing to say. There was a lot I wanted to ask, and I resented him a lot. But I don't want to. I didn't press him for the reason. It wasn't because I had a good guess why or because there was no need to ask. Is that so? If that's his wish, then simply granting it would be enough. Then is there nothing you'd want done to this bastard? No. Please just handle it as you see fit, mister. Whether you cut his head off in one stroke, or torture him to death, I don't care. And indeed, Teshi turned his back as if he had no lingering attachment, picked up his little sister who had been hiding among the members, and quietly disappeared into the crowd. Geez, he could at least watch. It's a mentality that's truly hard for me to understand. But if that's what he wishes, I have no choice but to go along with it. I'm going to ask you a few questions now. If you answer well, I'll send you off less painfully. After that, I one-sidedly questioned the bastard, and once my curiosity was more or less satisfied, I smashed his head in a single breath. Somehow, I felt like I could understand Teshi's feelings, at least a little. Crunch. You have killed a storm gush. It was just a waste of time. After sharing a few pieces of the information I'd found out from the storm gush with the main force, I went to find Teshi, who had holed himself up in the forest. He was just leaning his back against a tree, like a human would. I'm sorry. That was the first thing Teshi said when he sensed my presence, opened his eyes and saw me. Sorry? For what? Just, you went to all that trouble for me, but I didn't do anything. Forget it. If that's what you wanted, then that's that. I roughly laid my body down in the brush next to Teshi and rested my head on my arm. After staying like that for quite a while, Teshi finally spoke. So, is it over? Yeah, it's over. How do you feel? I'm not sure. It's not as relieving as I thought it would be. Teshi looked confused, unable to identify exactly what he was feeling, so I defined it for him, plain and simple. Not relieving, my ass. That is relief. At the very least, you won't have that feeling of stomach acid rising up at the thought of that bastard laughing away and living happily, right? Haha. That's definitely true. Teshi responded with an awkward laugh. It didn't seem like he genuinely agreed with me, but rather that he was just being considerate of my efforts, so I quickly acknowledged it too. No matter how much I tried to gaslight him into thinking this was relief, it wasn't going to work on the current Teshi. So, it feels stifling, doesn't it? Yes, I don't know why, but it feels like something is tightly blocking me up inside. Yeah, that's right. How unfair it must feel to have his entire life turned to shit because of a pathetic bastard like that. And even with that bastard dead, nothing in reality changes. Teshi had already become a monster, and he's gained pain that can never be erased. In the end, no matter what I do, the fact that it's a bad ending doesn't change. A path to a happy ending never existed from the start. All I could do for him was the lesser of two evils. Just a slightly better ending, at best. Just like this. There's a drug that erases memories. If you want, I can use it on you. LT4, a drug I obtained by ransacking the research building. Since it was something the researchers had been using on Teshi, it would undoubtedly work, and given that there was a sufficient supply, it might even be possible to erase all his memories of being tortured. No, I don't want that, Teshi answered firmly. Why? I'm not good with words, so I can't really explain it well. Teshi trailed off, then said, I just feel like I don't want to. What? Once again, it was a completely unexpected line. Maybe that's why? I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Is that strange? No, not at all. I was just a little surprised to think the will of a barbarian is flowing even within Teshi. I don't think I've been able to properly say this until now. Thank you for everything you've done for us. I'll live the rest of my life without ever forgetting it. I tilted my head. I know it's imposing to ask for more here, but if you could perhaps take me and my little sister to an uninhabited island. It was the moment Teshi's words reached that point, ZZZT. The world stopped. This phenomenon, which I was now experiencing for a third time. You escaped the island together with Tetrajia, who was barely clinging to life while enduring pain, and his younger sister Lemia, and eliminated all those responsible for everything. You're a splendid savior. Total score, 90 points. I reacted instantly, like a pro gamer caught in a CC chain. Behell, I felt bad for startling Teshi unintentionally, but it couldn't be helped. Why are you acting like it's all over? The revenge isn't over yet. Storm Gush was only the second target. To head towards the true ending, one final objective remains. No, what on earth do you mean? The sea god, Leviathan. We have to kill it. What? Why on earth would you? I've never even seen him before. Geez, this kid talks back at every turn. The meeting began. A meeting to reassess our current state and discuss the details for our next objective. However, unlike before, the expressions of those attending this meeting were stiff. The reason was very simple. The portal didn't open this time either. In the end, that means we have to deal with even the Leviathan. Seriously, just how bloodthirsty is that monster fellow? Given that we've dealt with this much for him, he should know when to be satisfied. Despite finishing my conversation with Teshi, the portal hadn't opened. Well, actually, I rejected it, but, at least, that's what they believed. After all, I'm the only one who can communicate smoothly with Teshi. What good does blaming the situation do? Let's put our heads together and come up with a plan instead. First of all, if the Leviathan appears on day 51 like before, we don't have much time. The attitudes of the leaders of each group were very different from before. Worry was now outweighing greed, you could say. It was a very practical reason. The evil destroying arrows were all used up a while ago. Only 2 shots of little flash remain. We have almost no scrolls left either. We've already consumed far too many resources. To put it simply, it meant that in the next raid, that the same kind of free ride as before won't be possible. It's a small comfort that even if you die, you just wake up outside. But it's a shame. If only the portal had opened this time, there would be no reason to even worry about this. Facing a grade 1 monster head-on with a straightforward approach would inevitably lead to a loss of manpower, and that was not what they wanted. The expedition had already achieved a lot. After all, for them, getting even one more person back alive to earn entry rights to the Twin Seas was a far more attractive option. But that's their problem. It might be selfish, but I had already decided to do the Leviathan raid. I mean, when else would I ever gather a force like this? Moreover, it's not even like we'd actually die. I can say with certainty that an environment this favorable will most likely never come again. So, besides, it's not like I'm going for the true ending route just for my own benefit. I made an effort to shake off my guilt, and in the meeting, which proceeded in a serious atmosphere, I actively spoke up and sought ways to minimize losses as much as possible. And did the heavens take notice of such efforts? Actually, we do have one more shot left. In the middle of the meeting, the elves' representative suddenly brought up something no one had expected. One shot? What do you mean? Exactly what I said. If you're talking about the evil destroying arrows, didn't you say you only brought 2 in total? As the gazes of people tilting their heads in confusion focused on him, the elves' representative averted his eyes, as if embarrassed. It was actually 3 arrows. I apologize for not telling you all in advance. I had orders from above that I absolutely must save the last arrow for a decisive moment. The rest was left unsaid, but there was no one who failed to understand the full situation hidden within. Whether they lost 2 arrows or 3 arrows, it was an insane loss either way, so the elves decided to hedge their bet from the start. It's a bit annoying that they were hiding it, though. There was probably that kind of calculation behind it too. A trump card that saves everyone from a desperate situation? Perfect for acting high and mighty and making a big deal about it later. Just the kind of petty scheming I'd expect from pointy ears. Well, whatever. I guess it doesn't matter. There's only one thing that matters right now. Smirk. There's still 1 arrow left. Chapter 922. Transcendence, 2. Before killing Stormgush, most of the questions I'd asked were about Leviathan. Naturally, I had a lot of curiosities about that topic as well. How did he ask for help? What position does the sea god hold within the Earth Mother faith? Also, whether it has any known weaknesses or characteristics in this world setting I wasn't aware of. I carried out various interrogations, and after more or less confirming all the information I needed to hear, I converted the bastard into a mana stone without a moment's hesitation. He also dropped an essence. The essence that came out was placed in a test tube and carefully stored away. It wasn't an unidentified essence, but it's still a grade 3 essence, so I could get a pretty good price for it outside. Hovelian, have you found out anything? There's someone from the magic tower with knowledge of alchemy, so we've been researching together, but we haven't had any notable results yet. I shared the information about the drug we obtained from the laboratory where Tashi had been in prison with the main force as well. After all, we were operating as an expedition unit. I shared openly about the acquired item without hiding anything, and thankfully, my contribution with the Firefly Ring was recognized, so it was officially acknowledged as a personally acquired item. Well, if we had just kept our mouths shut, no one would have known. The reason I was honest about it was simple. Keeping quiet would essentially mean I was secretly pocketing loot, and I didn't particularly want to pull such a petty move, and on top of that, this kind of thing usually blows up into a big deal later. Yet, there's a reason long-standing celebrities diligently pay their taxes on time. Above all, there was also that the GM alone wasn't enough to research what kind of drug it is. Just like this. However, as expected, alchemy has been helpful. For now, our emerging speculation so far is that it's a drug related to essence. It's a good thing I didn't jump straight into human experimentation. Messing with essences carelessly can lead to immediate disaster. Just like when I was hit with omen of corruption before. Come to think of it, it's about that time. After the battle with Snectura, the period I spent going through the dimensional collapse was about 10 days 60 days in the previous exploration where my first round had taken place. Soon, the 120-day waiting period would end and the seal on Transcendence would be released, though I'm not sure exactly what day it will be released. During the dimensional collapse, things had been so chaotic that I hadn't been able to keep proper track of time. I said about 10 days, but there could be a margin of error of 1 to 2 days. Accounting for margin of error, the seal will be released on day 52 at the latest. Please, let there be no margin of error so it gets released even 1 day sooner, because the Sea God raid starts on day 51. Or alternatively, let the seal release after the raid is completely over. HUU. Honestly, just thinking about this makes my heart pound. How will the Bayuan essence have changed when the seal is released? If I'm lucky, it might only change a little and that'll be it. or I could become a completely ruined character. Of course, the new Transcendence could evolve into an essence befitting the new shield barbarian, but I would have to be very, very lucky. Thump. In that state, with my worries far outweighing my anticipation, time passed. Fuck. Finally, day 51, the day of the Sea God raid, dawned. Unfortunately, the seal had not yet been released. Day 51, the day in my first round when the Sea God had invaded Lemia Island, where the Imperial Army was stationed. We were still staying on Faroon Island. To be precise, should I say the waters just off it? We really didn't have a choice in the first place. The research base on Lemia Island was still blanketed in abyssal fog with no sign of it dissipating. And there's no telling what the Leviathan might turn into if it went in there. Of course, there was also the possibility it could transform into a monster with simpler patterns, making the difficulty easier. But there was no reason to take on unnecessary variables. At least with a normal Leviathan, we had information to work with. If it mutated into a new species of monster, we'd have to start over from the scouting phase. Naturally, planning a strategy in advance would be impossible too. The Sea God has appeared on Route 3, currently moving toward Lemia Island. As we waited, fully prepared, information came in from those who had gone out as scouts. Estimated time to arrival is approximately 5 minutes. It's heading straight there. I thought it might stop by Faroon Island before invading. Dark clouds were visible in the distance. Dark clouds moving rapidly, carried by the fiercely blowing wind. That monster must be right beneath them. I'm nervous, Naya. Don't be too nervous. There won't be much for us to do in the beginning anyway. I'll just trust in you, Naya. While chatting with my comrades to ease the tension, part of my mind stayed focused on the real-time updates coming from the reconnaissance team. Arrived at Lemia Island. It has stopped in front of the abyssal fog. I felt a little nervous. If this thing has any intelligence, it probably wouldn't just waltz into some unknown fog. But you never know. The Sea God has begun moving. Estimated direction is Faroon Island. Right. So it's coming here first to find out what's going on. Estimated time, 3 minutes. The moment the time limit was set, silence fell over the magic warship floating in the waters off Faroon Island. There was no particular reason to get busy at this point. We had already finished preparations at our respective positions long ago, and all that remained was to steel our hearts for the decisive battle. 2 minutes. The members, facing what would be the final battle of this expedition, quietly steadied their breathing or fidgeted with the weapons in their hands, each easing their tension in their own way. And 1 minute, when the final report was relayed through the comms, thick droplets began to fall, as if a downpour was about to come down. And you have entered the range of center of the world. I felt a gravitational pull throughout my entire body, a sensation as if something is grabbing my whole body and pulling it in. The compass mounted on the deck like a decoration was spinning wildly as if broken, but that was just a trivial effect not even mentioned in text. The important thing about that aura is this: the use of water becomes impossible. Within its range, everything with a water attribute tag is sealed. In my case, Origin, which increases natural regeneration when in contact with seawater, became unusable. And for the record, potions were now also unusable. That aura doesn't discriminate between equipment and consumables. Furthermore, corrosion has begun. All metal tags are gradually sealed. This didn't simply mean that the durability of things like swords and shields would drop rapidly as time went on. Steel attribute magic and abilities would progressively weaken, and once corrosion reaches 100%, they'd be completely sealed and become unusable. In my case, that would be Evolving Shell, an Iron Fortress, as expected of a monster ranked in the upper tier even among rank 1 monsters. Just by showing up, it rendered 2 attributes completely useless. On top of that, taking into account its fire resistance is nearly at the maximum value, so fire doesn't work on it either. In truth, most rank 1 monsters were like this. From the perspective of those having to raid them, there are far too many unfair aspects. Well, it's still our job to take it down. The thick raindrops turned into a torrential downpour, and before long, the dark clouds that had been visible in the distance were now directly above our heads. 30 seconds. Just as the report updated once more, the monster revealed itself within the curtain of rain. Its appearance was somewhat similar to Belarius, a form similar not to a western dragon, but to an eastern dragon. Whoosh! The Leviathan, which came flying in as if swimming atop the sea, came to a stop at a point some distance from us. Wait until the signal is given. Independent action will not be tolerated. As those assigned command roles were issuing warnings in case anyone acted rashly, a voice echoed inside my head. Who are you? That voice didn't follow any linguistic system. It was like hearing crackling static noise, yet somehow its meaning was naturally understood. A sensation as if the will itself was being transmitted. It's an obvious thing to say, but given the circumstances, there was only one possible owner of this question. Leviathan. Did that monster just speak to us? Most explorers had no experience communicating with monsters, so the members on deck were thrown into commotion. In truth, every monster in this place was a being capable of communication, so it was hardly anything new. But hearing it in the ancient language they couldn't understand versus hearing it directly must have felt completely different. Viscount, what will you do? At Gwyn's question, checking my intentions first, I thought for a moment before answering. First, I'll try engaging in conversation. This is a voice amplification device, so if you speak into this, it will be heard well enough over there. Just press here and speak. Having received an object similar to a telephone receiver, I first tried testing it out. Can you hear me? My amplified voice traveled through the speakers mounted on the ship and echoed far across the Great Sea. The reply was immediate. A language I've never heard before? I cannot understand it at all. So it can't understand our language. It seems its method of communication was one way. Therefore, I switched to the ancient language. Can you understand me now? Yes. Let me ask one thing. Are you the ones who dealt with the Imperials on that island? At that question, my brow furrowed deeply. It was an incredibly easy question, yet for some reason, I hesitated to answer. I thought about the reason for a moment, and the answer came quickly. It's too nice. The content of its words seemed gentler than expected. What would happen if I answered yes to that question? Would it treat us as friends? I wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. If this can be resolved through dialogue, that would be for the best. We may have an evil-destroying arrow, but there will surely be casualties. The moment that path opened up even slightly, our expedition group would become far more passive about tackling the raid. Why do you not answer? My head is a mess. What is the right choice? I asked if you were the ones who dealt with the Imperials. My deliberation was brief, but I ultimately made my decision. None of the members could properly understand ancient language spoken with native pronunciation anyway. At best, they could only catch a few words or do a bit of reading. So, that's right, we're the ones who dealt with the Empire. And while I'm at it, we also completely smashed up the village that was full of these cursed monsters. The one who sucks storms? We cut off his head and killed him too. Did you know him? Holding the receiver, I provoked the monster as if declaring war. Its reaction was instantaneous. The noise echoing through my head couldn't even be interpreted as a single word. Only the emotion of rage was transmitted all too clearly. Is that why? What on earth did you say to make it so furious? To Gwyn's question, asked with a pale face, I answered as if I too had absolutely no idea. I don't know. I just spoke honestly. Yeah, I spoke honestly. It's an undeniable fact that we smashed up Faerun Island and took Stormgush's head, isn't it? Chapter 923, Transcendence, 3. Noise filled with the emotion of rage kept echoing inside my head. It couldn't be interpreted as a single language like before, but if I were to try putting that noise into words, you bastard, I'll kill you. Yeah, it felt exactly something like that. In fact, the raid also began from the very moment it first unleashed its fury. Kulung, the magic warship, protected by a mana barrier, rocked violently like a roly-poly toy. If it had been an ordinary ship, it would have capsized long ago. However, the magic warship, the pride of the magic tower that top-ranking wizards had devoted several years to creating, quickly regained its balance and pressed forward. Schwa. Yes, we're currently shooting across the sea, aboard the magic warship, which was maintaining maximum cruising speed by pouring mana stones into its engine. Entity confirmed at the stern of the hull. We're being chased by the Leviathan. Well, that's the basics of the Leviathan raid. Commencing bombardment at maximum output. Boom, boom. While creating as much distance as possible on the ship, we fired the magic cannons and unleashed a barrage of pre-selected abilities and magic spells at the pursuing Leviathan. This pattern will continue for a while, because from phase 3 onward, it doesn't use the Spirit Bomb. Spirit Bomb, of course, that wasn't its official name, but a nickname I had called it with a mixture of affection and hatred back when I played the game. Leviathan has cast Thunderbolt. Its official name is Thunderbolt, a skill with insane power, enough to instantly half-destroy even this sturdy magic warship the moment it hits. However, the way to deal with it is extremely easy and simple. I mean, it's common sense in this world that if your strength is high, your agility suffers, isn't it? Area targeting, and a full 10-second delay. Thunderbolt, which has 2 fatal flaws, can be countered by moving quickly like we were now and simply not stopping. Just like this. Kwong. An ivory-colored sphere of light fell from the sky, crashing into the water behind the stern of the ship that had been cutting through the waves, erupting with a thunderous sound. Of course, since there was some distance, there was no direct damage to the hull, but, what in the... That was truly a close call. If that had hit the hull, the members, looking at the spot where Thunderbolt had landed, were greatly flustered. To be honest, I was just as flustered. Vroom. The hull rocked violently from the waves created by Thunderbolt's explosion. This was something that hadn't happened before. I mean, this was the first time Thunderbolt had landed this close. It wasn't hard to figure out the cause. It's firing predictive shots. It fired a predictive shot. Since we were just moving in a straight line, instead of targeting our current position, it targeted the spot we'd likely reach in 10 seconds as the impact point for Thunderbolt, something that absolutely could never happen in the game. However, there was no reason to complain about it. It's not like this is the first time there's been a discrepancy between the game and reality. Above all, didn't we learn this without taking any real damage? That it fires predictive shots. So, change direction periodically, randomly, with no pattern, so it can't predict us. I'll accept the slight reduction in maximum speed that results from it. If it's going to act proactively, we just need to respond flexibly and kind. And indeed, after we started changing directions, Thunderbolt never landed anywhere near us again. Well, in exchange, the ship slowed down and we got hit by basic attacks a bit more often though. Kuang, a tail shot up from beneath the sea like a tentacle and slammed down with enough force to shatter the mana barrier. Leviathan has cast Shipwreck. Air blasts fired from its main body periodically shook the hull with thunderous sounds. Of course, it's not like we just sat there taking hits. Entity confirmed at 1 o'clock from the hull. The monster primarily moved underwater, but whenever it revealed itself above the surface like this, we mobilized every bit of firepower we had and poured it all into it! Seeing how its rage keeps growing with every hit it takes, the damage seems to be accumulating steadily. At this rate, Phase 2 should be starting soon. As expected, Phase 1 doesn't have much to it. Of course, this is a thought I can only have because I'm a tank. It makes sense, doesn't it? In battles of land and sea, Leviathan handles the sea part. So what's a barbarian like me supposed to do here? 99% of warrior classes, myself included, could only stand around on the ship watching awkwardly while cheering on the ranged damage dealers. Well, Ainer was a bit different since she had recursion. Kuahaha. Did you see that, Miss Shah? That sea monster just writhed in agony after it got hit by my spear, don't tell me you missed it, Tisk. Even if you're completely useless in this fight, you should at least be paying attention. Somehow this is kinda irritating me, Naya. Calm down, Miss Shah. This can't be helped. Yet, it can't be helped. What's a vanguard supposed to do in a raid that's done on a ship? Especially when the magic warship itself was serving as the tank. At least from Phase 2 onward, warriors aren't completely without something to do. Of course, just because we had something to do didn't mean we'd be playing a major role. Even in Phase 2, the stars of this raid would be the ranged damage dealers. That's why I couldn't afford to miss this opportunity. Leviathan is a boss I absolutely had to take down before moving on. And to have a magic warship, Little Flash, an evil destroying arrow, and dozens of magic tower wizards, it went without saying just how much time and effort it would take before another Leviathan raid would become possible again if this opportunity was missed. Don't worry, Bjorn. We'll make sure to take care of your contribution. Yet, I'm counting on you, Abman. At least the fortunate thing was that even though we were few in number, most of us were ranged types. Setting Ainer aside, there was Abman, the GM, Armin, Charlotte. There were only a few pure vanguards like Miss Shah and me. Shwa. Suddenly, warm sunlight poured down on my soaking wet body. When I come to my senses, the rain had already stopped, and Leviathan has cast Final Destination. As if we were positioned in the eye of a typhoon, torrential rain was still falling far off in the distance, but our location alone was calm, as though we had entered another world. Even a radiance that felt like heavenly light was pouring down. If someone were to look at this place from afar, it would probably look like a bright yellow pillar of light connecting to the sky, like a beacon. Right, it's already Phase 2. I shouted loud enough for my voice to ring across the entire deck. Prepare for battle. At last, it was time for the vanguards to earn their keep. The setup is the same. The ship is still cutting through the waves, and the Leviathan is pursuing it, hammering the mana barrier with its basic attacks. But, hold them back, knock them off. You don't have to kill them, just make them fall off the ship. With the start of Phase 2, one thing was added. All sorts of sea monsters living in the sea were clinging to the hull and climbing all the way up to the deck. Sirens, spear dippers, sea giants, countless monsters that could be seen on the 6th floor. The maximum was rank 3, and since there were no rank 2 monsters yet, the battles themselves weren't particularly difficult, but the problem was their numbers. They're like cockroaches. They were like a legion, and no matter how many we killed, there was no end to them. Because of that, on the rocking deck, the fatigue of the vanguards, who had to fight precarious battles right at the railings, was higher than ever. Uag, a beastman warrior, who had been knocking off monsters from the railing, got tangled with one and plummeted into the sea below. God damn it. The warriors who saw this cursed and gritted their teeth, but not a single one attempted a rescue, because it was impossible. How would they turn the ship around in the middle of all this? And even if they did, how would they pull someone out of a sea teeming with monsters? The only consolation was that even if you die, you resurrect having lost only your equipment and memories. Flash. At that moment, light swirled at the spot where the warrior had fallen, and a single, horrifyingly giant tentacle shot up above the water's surface. Kraken. It's a kraken. Kraken. a rank 2 monster that only appears when certain conditions are met in specific waters of the 6th floor. For the record, this one didn't spawn naturally, and the maximum rank that can be summoned by Final Destination is rank 3. After all, talk about rotten luck. Monsters that get a kill within the area of Final Destination have a low chance of ranking up. Things were so chaotic I couldn't get a proper look, but it seems the monster that dragged the Beastman warrior into the sea must have been a rank 3 monster. SLRRK. Soon, the Kraken latched onto the ship, and the already chaotic deck descended into even greater pandemonium. The vanguards at the railings now had to deal with writhing tentacles on top of everything else. A raid within the middle of another raid had begun. Damn it, our speed has dropped. We have to do something about that thing. The biggest problem was that our cruising speed had slowed, and since the ranged damage dealers had to focus their firepower on the Leviathan, we couldn't expect significant support from them either. Kwang. The depletion rate is greater than the recharge speed. Despite pouring in mana stones, the mana barrier was being depleted even faster than it could recharge. We had to somehow do something about the Kraken. Also, we had to be careful not to let another rank 2 monster appear in the meantime. Of all things, a Kraken. The matchup wasn't good, because to kill a Kraken, you had to destroy all the cores located in its 8 tentacles. There was no way to cheese it by going click with little flash. Still, what can we do? We have to try. I began giving orders to the warriors in earnest, taking command of this secondary raid that had broken out on the deck. You, and you too. From now on, just follow me. I picked out melee damage dealers whose specs I had fully memorized, quickly assembled a strike team, and while the rest held the line, we methodically destroyed the octopus tentacles one by one. When necessary, I requested support from the main force, borrowing their magic or skills. And how much time passed? You have killed a Kraken. EXP +8. Finally, we destroyed the last tentacle clinging to the deck and succeeded in the Kraken raid. What? A rank 2 raid is this hard? Even if it was the same rank, it would have been much easier if it had been a land mob. We had to go through every hardship imaginable to kill it, and in essence didn't even come out. Well, even if it had come out, it probably wouldn't have been easy to collect the essence intro test tube in the middle of all this. Anyway, looks like the main force was working hard too. Not long after we dealt with the Kraken, results came in from the main force's side as well. After continuously accumulating damage, they had finally forced it to use the skill that signaled the start of Phase 3. Leviathan has cast Great Flood. Suddenly, dark clouds formed once again, cutting off the light that had been shining down, and the monsters that had been swarming like crazy, using the light as a beacon, also began to gradually retreat. And so, we gained a brief moment of silence for the first time in a while. What is that? A warrior who suddenly looked up at the sky had their pupils dilate widely. It was understandable. Where else would you ever see such a surreal sight? Rainfall, downpour. Those words don't do it justice. No, I'm not even sure any expression could describe that spectacle. A giant water bomb? A water meteorite? I don't know. Schwa. As if a dam had burst, a tidal wave poured down from the sky. For the record, this kind of effect didn't exist in the game. When the monster started Phase 3, you simply opened your eyes in a new space. Everything within the radius sinks. Yet, just like this. When I came to my senses, the ship we were on was sinking into the sea. The lights mounted on the magic warship were emitting light, but that light couldn't spread far and was refracted by the high water pressure, blurrily buried in the darkness. I couldn't breathe. My ears ached. The breathing problem was quickly resolved using magic the wizard had prepared, and everyone quietly braced themselves at their positions for what was to come. Kuang. After a prolonged descent, our magic warship finally reached the bottom, and as if it had been waiting for this moment, 2 streaks of eye light emerged from the dark deep sea and turned toward us. What? Is this a welcome to Phase 3 sort of thing? It was at that moment, as I rolled my joints with a smirk, trying to relieve even a little of the pre-battle tension. Around my heart, I felt an unfamiliar sensation that was difficult to put into words. I was briefly taken aback by the sensation I'd never felt before in my entire life, but I was soon able to instinctively recognize its identity. A part of your soul has been perfectly corrupted. At last, the corruption of Transcendence was finished. Chapter 924, Transcendence, 4. The Snictra raid that took place at the Arta's secret base. The omen of corruption that I got hit with there. This was already my second labyrinth exploration since then, and at last, at this very moment, the seal on Transcendence, which had been in an unusable state all this time, was finally released. Thump. Even though we were about to start Phase 3 of the Leviathan raid, my heart was pounding for a different reason. Just what could have changed, and how, depending on the outcome, the future of the new Shield Barbarian would be decided. Thump. An urge to check it right away surged up inside me, but I barely managed to suppress it with superhuman patience. After all, I didn't know how it had changed. I had to assume the worst. If I carelessly tried testing it out, this raid that was going smoothly could be ruined. Yet, Bjorn, Are you okay, Naya? Nothing's wrong, is it? What made you think that? Well, your expression looked kinda scary. Did my expression really look that bad? It's just your imagination. I'm fine, so don't worry. If that's the case, that's a relief. I tucked away my outward emotions and focused my attention on the situation before me. The sea god, Leviathan, a rank 1 sea monster of the Great Sea. This was not an easy enough enemy to handle while my mind was elsewhere, especially since the core of this raid was in Phase 3. Leviathan has cast Shipwreck from beyond the darkness, where only 2 streaks of eye light gleamed. The skill that could be called its basic attack was fired. An air blast shot like a bullet through water, leaving a trail in its wake. The damage wasn't that great. As the basic attack from a rank 1 monster, any ordinary explorer would die instantly upon being hit, but the target of that basic attack right now was the pride of the magic tower, the magic warship. Boom. If it were firing dozens of shots per second like a machine gun spraying bullets, that'd be a different story, but this level of DPS can be easily withstood by the mana barrier. However, the problem was that we're now in Phase 3. Shipwreck was literally just a basic attack. The real threat of this phase was Great Flood itself. You have entered a special area. Field effect, Great Flood is applied. Status effect, sinking is applied. Status effect, sinking. Its effect is simple. The maximum value of all resources decreases every second. The MP needed to use skills. The mana consumed for magic spells. The divine power used by priests. The maximum of all those gauge bars decreases as time passes. It was 2% per minute. Simply put, after 50 minutes it reaches 0%. Everyone becomes a useless husk, unable to use any skills. In a way, it's an even worse penalty than the abyssal fog. Well, even so, it does have the constraint that while the ceiling is high, it takes time to reach that point. But, if we can't advance to the next phase within 50 minutes, it's over. To put it briefly, that is the core of Phase 3. After all, how could anyone carry out a raid with 0 MP? No, in the first place, once that situation arrives, the oxygen tank magic would also be dispelled, so never mind the raid, everyone would end up suffocating and drowning. Of course, there were ways to counter it. For example, Lantern of Malice. No need to look far, one of the raid members had that rare rank 2 skill. Just by using that skill, the very one used during the Berserk raid, it would be possible to change this field effect into a different one. But, vroom, we had ruled out that option while preparing for this raid. There were 2 reasons for this. First, Lantern of Malice has too much of a luck factor, and, why bother? We have the means to advance to the next phase within 50 minutes without relying on luck. An evil destroying arrow and 2 shots of little flash. The ultimate consumable items in this world, so expensive that you could still take a net loss even after killing a rank 1 monster. We judged that using these would allow us to end Phase 3 in one fell swoop. Entity approaching within range. Of course, this was strictly our own judgment. No one could know what the outcome would be in actual combat, so I stayed tense and watched the situation closely. Firing preparations complete. The eye light hidden in the darkness grew even more intense, and finally, its massive form began to reveal its outline. Perhaps it was due to the refraction of the water, or maybe it was because we were seeing its entire body, previously hidden beneath the surface, for the first time. At its stature, which looked far larger and more imposing than before, the raid members' expressions hardened as they focused on the radio comms. Estimated hit probability, 97%. 97%. Simply calculating, that means it would only miss 3 times out of 100. What is the estimated hit probability for the second shot? Approximately 79%. Is there a way to increase it further? It is possible if the entity approaches closer, but that carries a risk. Once the entity begins to move in earnest, the hit rate will conversely drop. Is that so? The time spent deliberating wasn't long. Quallen, who had been holding a transceiver and communicating via radio near me, soon reached a decision. Fire. It was the obvious course of action. There was no way a coward who couldn't bet on odds like these would have made it this far. Exclamation mark. In that instant, the surroundings turned white as if lightning had struck the dark depths of the sea. Suddenly, something I heard during a meeting in the planning stage came to mind. They said that a flash fired underwater would be slower than usual. It seemed the difference wasn't something that human senses could discern. The instant the momentary light that had been illuminating the deep sea went out, the result became visible to the naked eye. As expected, it didn't croak in one hit. The little flash's impact point was its forehead, a spot well known as a leviathan's weak point. To be precise, it was something like a jewel embedded in its forehead. Normally it was covered as if an eyelid were closed over it, but in Phase 3, that shell is peeled away, exposing it to the outside. Well, this much was expected. Exclamation mark. Before long, lightning struck the deep sea once more. A second shot fired at the same moment the leviathan, sensing danger from the fierce surprise attack, began to twist its body, clench. For some reason, my fists tightly clenched. The estimated hit probability was 79%, was it? Honestly, at those odds, missing would be closer to getting screwed over by bad luck, but, thump, getting screwed over isn't exactly unfamiliar for me, you know. I wonder what the result will be. It's a hit. Remarkably, the second round defied the 79% odds and successfully struck the targeted spot. However, the problem was, it didn't break. Right, so even this wasn't enough. We had judged that 2 shots would be enough, as long as they hit their mark. Perhaps it was because we didn't fully consider the environment. The magic tower had almost no experience firing little flash underwater. After all, inevitably, there were bound to be errors in the data. The 2 shots of little flash that struck its weak point must have hurt quite a bit, as the Leviathan roared aloud for the first time during the raid. However, perhaps because it considered the surprise attack from moments ago threatening, it wasn't charging straight at us. Gwalin spoke, forcibly suppressing his bitterness. Then in the end, we'll have to go with Plan 2. Plan 2. In other words, Plan B. Please tell Miss Ultrasha to make preparations as soon as. Wait, when I stopped him from moving on to the next plan, Gwalin tilted his head. Did you think of some kind of good plan? Not really. It's just, a thought suddenly occurred to me. It's hard to explain in words, but, I think we should save the evil destroying arrow until the very end. After all, Plan B was to also use the evil destroying arrow to blow past Phase 3 in one go. I understand well enough what you mean, but isn't it the case that we have no other countermeasure? It's not that there isn't one. Isn't there Plan 3? We have Plan C. Plan 3 is hardly even something you could call a plan. He certainly wasn't wrong about that. If Plan B didn't work either, we were to grit our teeth and charge in with our bare bodies. That was Plan C. But, there will surely be heavy losses. I cut off Gwalin as he objected as though the idea were absurd, and asked back, is Plan 2 any different? Don't play dumb. You know it too. Even if we manage to get through this moment, we'll just face the same losses later on. Using the evil destroying arrow would let us get past Phase 3 easily, sure, but what about Phase 4? It would be a far more grueling raid. I heard that if we shut down the magic warship's operations, we can use that mana to fire one more little flash. Do you not know what that means? The moment its operations are shut down, this warship becomes no different from an ordinary ship. Even as I watched Gwalin shouting as if having a fit, I calmly nodded. I know. If the mana barrier disappears, a single hit from shipwreck, which is no different from a basic attack, would turn the pride of the magic tower, the magic warship, into tattered rag. Yet, it could even go beyond being reduced to rag and take damage so severe that repair is completely impossible. For him, as a representative of the magic tower, it was undoubtedly a terrifying prospect. But, so what? I spoke confidently. Have you forgotten where we are? This place where we are now is a special area of the Great Sea. Everything goes back to the way it was once we get out of here anyway, and I doubt it'll be any different just because it's a ship. That's not certain. Not certain, my ass. When I came out after my first round exploration, I was on the same rowboat I'd gone in with, and it was even a boat I'd previously long since lost during the exploration, Gwalin couldn't offer any rebuttal to my logic and ultimately brought up a different issue. Even if we shut down its operations, to use the little flash, we'd need to convert the mana from the warship's power source. That will take a considerable amount of time. How long will it take? It will take a good 10 minutes at least, and if the warship takes a hit before then, I cut Gwalin off once again. After all, I'd already heard all the information I needed. Then that's settled. Don't worry about the warship. Don't worry? What do you mean by? That was the end of our conversation. I'll handle that bastard somehow. With those final words, I sprinted across the deck and leaped over the railing. And, boom, standing firmly atop the mud that sank up to my ankles, I looked up straight in front of me. It really is a bone-chilling size. Leviathan's eye light turned toward me. Well, from its perspective, it must be fascinating too. Right before its eyes stood someone who had willingly jumped off the safe ship that had withstood its basic attacks countless times. The monster's emotions transmitted into my head in the form of noise. For some reason, it seemed far more enraged than before. Well, it makes sense. Not only had we fled aboard a suspiciously sturdy ship, but just moments ago, we'd landed 2 sharp strikes right on its weak point. Vroom. As if it had finally found a target to unleash its rage upon, it swam through the water as if gliding, heading toward me. Those eyes, though, behind that eye light overflowing with killing intent, there seemed to be nothing but thoughts of how to tear me to shreds. But I decided to look at it positively. After all, the whole reason I'd gotten off the ship was to draw aggro. If it was going to make me the target of its frustrations, that was something I'd actually welcome. As if pouring oil on a fire, I used wild outburst to raise my already high threat level even further, then braced for impact while gripping my shield tightly. As I was doing that, a sudden feeling of regret welled up inside me. Tisk. Leviathan's body length was nearly 100 meters. Of course, while I say 100 meters, that's measured from head to tail, so it's not quite like a monster the size of a 100-meter tall building. The weight class difference is just too big right now. Not more, not less, just exactly. If I could just use Transcendence, X, giantization, I felt I could at least match the minimum weight class. Should I try it? My deliberation didn't take long. It might be a somewhat impulsive decision, but I wasn't on the magic warship anymore, was I? Even if a massive explosion occurred the moment I used Transcendence, there'd be no harm done to my allies. Yet, so, Transcendence. For the first time in a truly long while, I internally recited that command. The effect of the passive skill Transcendence has been permanently altered. Transcendence no longer enhances the performance of all passive skills. The effect of the active skill Transcendence has been permanently altered. From now on, when Transcendence is used, the next skill used will be permanently enhanced. You have cast giantization. By the authority of the corrupted transcendental body, the ability inherent in this skill has been permanently enhanced. Your physique grows bigger in proportion to your physical stat. When a monster of large size or greater exists within radius, gain an additional 2 times increase. Chapter 925, Transcendence, 5. Giantization. A skill where the character's physique grows larger, and in proportion to the increased size, threat level and physical stats are increased. The base increase of the skill is 1.771 times, and when linked with Transcendence, an additional increase proportional to strength is granted. For reference, in my case, it was a total of about 2.7 times. Even after becoming an adult, my body continued to grow little by little, and my base height ultimately settled at 230 centimeters. When using Transcendence, X, giantization, in my normal state, my height was 620 centimeters, a height that could crush most mid-sized monsters and allowed me to look down on most. With that, I had more than fulfilled my role as a main tank all this time. But, what in the world is this? Vwoon. My body's growth isn't stopping. I had reached the eye level of 620 centimeters that was clearly familiar to me long ago, and yet, your physique grows bigger in proportion to your physical stat. My body, which was amplifying literally in accordance with human proportions, continued to grow to a point I had never experienced before. I think I'm around 9 meters or so. Is this the effect of the corrupted Transcendence? I've grown about 3 meters larger than usual. Truly a staggering degree of change. Even if it weren't the body of a human, but of some other beast, a difference this great would practically be enough to classifying it as a different species. And indeed, every sensation from head to toe feels unfamiliar. Since my proportions are the same, it seems like I could quickly adapt to something like walking. But, flash, the moment I met the light of the Leviathan eyes, shining in the deep sea, it's not over. My growth, which I thought had stopped, resumed, at an explosive speed, incomparable to before. When a monster of large size or greater exists within radius, gain an additional 2 times increase. When I came to my senses, the ground I stood on felt incredibly distant. I absent-mindedly turned my head toward where the magic warship was, and I could see the faces of the members standing on the deck, neither looking up, nor looking down, but exactly straight ahead. Thump. My giantized warrior's heart beat more powerfully than ever before. It's as if my heart was asking, just how big have I become? The answer to that question wasn't far away. Because Gwalin, the commander of the magic warship, had told me several times as if boasting. The magic warship, excluding the mast, just a height up to the deck alone. He said it was a supermassive warship reaching 23 meters. It was an incredibly peculiar feeling. A feeling I had never experienced when I was 5 meters, 6 meters at most. At this point, rather than saying I've grown larger, it felt as if everything in the world around me had become smaller. Clench. As I clenched and unclenched my palm, an indescribable sense of fulfillment welled up inside me. Strictly speaking, it wasn't fulfillment. A sense of omnipotence, as if I'd become something that transcends species. Turn. Once again, I turned my head and gazed in the Leviathan's direction. It no longer felt that big to me. Of course, it's still bigger than me, but, grin. Without realizing it, the corners of my mouth curved into a wide smile. I want to test out this body's performance right away. I want to rush out right now, grab its tail, and slam it into the ground. It was a desire I had no reason to hold back. Ew. What in the world is this absurdity? The Lord Viscount has truly turned into a giant. Am I dreaming right now? Behold, it's not just me. The members aboard the ship are also eagerly wanting for me to mercilessly crush that monster, aren't they? Yes. So, Kwong. I kicked off the ground hard enough to cause a tectonic shift and took the long-awaited first step. And, oh, never mind going far. I couldn't even go a single step. Shit. Kwong. I spectacularly fell flat on my face. Is it because I smashed my head so hard on the ground? There's a constant ringing in my ears. Ring. However, strangely enough, that ringing in my ears actually calmed me down. The excitement of having become a 23-meter endgame level giant barbarian gradually faded, and reason settled into my now cool head. How on earth did I end up like this? I chewed and swallowed the wet grains of sand that had roughly clung to my lips as I thought it over, and before long, I arrived at the answer on my own. Well, it was because I loved this game. Those mad with love will do anything, and I too had tried everything there was to try. So, the situation right now is, your total weight overwhelmingly exceeds your strength stat. Status effect overloaded is applied. Your agility stat is reduced by 99%. My body's weight had far exceeded the value my strength could support. This wasn't a common occurrence. After all, giantization also has the effect of increasing physical stats in proportion to the enlarged physique. The orc hero essence also has high strength attached to it, so falling into this state almost never happens. But it did happen occasionally, in cases where you obtained Transcendence early without having gotten another strength essence. Linking the two skills together would sometimes apply this status effect. Well, even then, it was just overweight at most. Looking at my current state where I can barely move at all, I've clearly gone far beyond overweight. It wasn't hard to understand. Giantization would have raised my strength stat much higher than usual, but the increase in weight must have been far greater than the increase in strength. Come to think of it, I remember seeing something like this on the internet before. It was an article about why giant robots are realistically impossible. Something about how if the length doubles, the surface area quadruples, and the weight increases eightfold. Anyway, the gist of the article was that past a certain height, the structure can no longer support the increase in weight. So the problem is that I grew too big, way too big. For now, I've identified what the problem is. So, moving sluggishly to push myself up, I braced my hands against the ground. But, what's this now? I tried to push myself up, but my arms hurt too much. A pain like my bones were repeatedly shattering and regenerating. That wasn't just a figure of speech, it was probably actually happening. Your total weight overwhelmingly exceeds your bone density stat. Status effect osteoporosis is applied. You take damage from all movements. Right, so I got this one too. It feels like I've received some kind of assorted gift basket. When I became 23 meters tall and looked at the magic warship, I felt like a true god barbarian. Leviathan has cast shipwreck. But I achieved my goal, so I guess it's fine. At this size, at the very least, I would have definitely drawn aggro. Even if I just stayed still and took a beating, it won't ignore me and attack the magic warship. I mean, I'm 23 meters, right? Even without the effect from the wall of Aegis, it would definitely prioritize taking me out first. By now, my threat level must be nearly maxed out. Oh, wait, threat level? Right, with my current threat level, Lord Viscount, be careful. The moment my thoughts reached that point, I heard a radio transmission in my head. In response, I barely managed to turn my head to look forward. Vroom. The eye light visible beyond the darkness of the deep sea was rapidly growing in size. Like the goblin that had been throwing rocks, the Leviathan, having tested the waters with shipwreck, was now charging straight at me. Bell, 2-2. I quickly spat away the wet grains of sand clinging to my lips and shouted, "Behell!" Unable to even support my own weight, I cried out the name of the ancestral god, while collapsed forward. But as always, it wasn't the ancestral god that helped me, but the laws of this world. No, in a way, could this also be an ancestral blessing? You have used Wild Outburst, a barbarian's secret technique, the first active skill I obtained through the spirit imprint. Your threat level has temporarily increased by 3 times, and your physical stats have increased in proportion to that value. The moment I let out a battle cry, immense vitality surged through my veins as if I'd taken an elixir. The pressure of the world, which had seemed to reject my very existence, gradually faded. It was a sensation like shackles being released. Was the world originally this light? Thud. I quickly pushed myself up from the ground and reached out toward the Leviathan charging straight at me. Of course, my movements aren't as fast as I'd expected. Your total weight exceeds your strength stat. Status effect overweight is applied. Your agility stat is reduced by 50%. Right, so even with the buff from Wild Outburst, my weight still exceeds my strength. It's a little disappointing, but what can I do? I should be satisfied that I can move at all, even if it's like this. Seeing as there's no pain, it seems like osteoporosis has been lifted. Fwiggish. Slow as it may be, my hand, possessing an absurd amount of mass, pushed through the water pressure and generated a wave as it moved forward. Of course, given my slow speed, I didn't expect to actually catch it, but, for some reason, even after seeing me reach out my hand, the Leviathan didn't change its trajectory. What the hell? Even I, the one reaching out, felt a brief moment of doubt bloom. It's definitely not that it was flustered by my surprise attack and couldn't react, nor did it seem like the kind of confidence born from underestimating me, believing I couldn't do anything to it no matter what I tried. My fleeting doubt was resolved upon seeing its eyes. They say the eyes are the window to the soul, but these aren't human eyes, they're monsters. Yet despite that, an incredibly clear emotion could be felt from those eyes, as if it was facing its sworn, mortal enemy, an unwavering determination to destroy me, no matter what. Anyone could see this wasn't a normal situation, but I no longer questioned it. because my mind had already arrived at the answer. Your threat level is 5000 or higher. Threat level 5000. Monsters attacking you will never retreat. In this state, the option to evade drops to the lowest priority for monsters. Therefore, squeeze. Even in the moment I roughly grabbed half its neck with one hand. Kyogre, Leviathan thrashed about, whipping my torso with its tail, jaws gaping wide with nothing on its mind but biting me to death. Crush. An impact that felt like my organs were bursting. Yet even so, my feet remained firmly planted on the ground. Even for a rank 1, the mass of this 23-meter supergiant barbarian was too great to be pushed back by the impact. Swish. I shifted my gaze to check the hammer gripped in my other hand. No. 87 Crawl's Demon Grinder. A top-tier numbered item with the effects of 500% increased damage when using blunt weapon skills and 50% armor penetration on downward strikes. My swap weapon, Siege Slaughterer, briefly crossed my mind as well, but I didn't bother pulling it out. Because of the mace's shape, the angle for striking with it in my current state was a bit awkward. More importantly, I don't think my damage will be lacking with this anyway. Having finished my assessment, I pulled back the arm holding the hammer while gripping the monster's neck, and then I quietly ran some calculations in my head. You have cast Swing. The coefficient for Swing is strength. I wonder, what's the absolute value of my strength in my current state? Your strength stat is 1200 or higher. Deal double damage to enemies with 90% or more HP. Seeing as that effect isn't triggering, it seems it's not at 5000. Does it matter? I decided to focus on weight rather than strength. After all, the base attack power of blunt weapons is based on mass. So then, just how much does this hammer weigh, now that it's grown massive to match my 23-meter physique through Unity? Vroom. My hammer, pushing forward at a slow speed as if tearing through the water current, soon provided the answer to that question. Croc. The answer was, it's enough. Enough to move on to the next phase without having to use Little Flash again, which costs hundreds of millions of stones per shot. Just now, what in the world did we just witness? With a dumbfounded muttering of the operator from the magic tower coming through the radio as the last thing I heard. Flash. The jewel embedded in its forehead shattered, and the entire world was dyed in light. Leviathan has cast Swallow. It's about time to bring this ray to an end. Chapter 926, Transcendence, 6. When I opened my eyes again, we were in an unfamiliar space. A passageway that stretched out in a straight line. The squirming walls were tinged with a bright red, as if we had entered the belly of a whale. The passageway, which seemed to be made of flesh, was wide enough for about 14 grown men to walk shoulder to shoulder, but for me, it was a bit ambiguous. My head touched the ceiling unless I hunched over. No monsters of large size or greater exist within radius. It was only then that I realized my body had shrunk again. Giantization hadn't been completely undone, but, let's just say I was no longer in that super giantization state from earlier. Bjorn, what in the world was that just now? You were like a giant got out of a myth. Just then, Einar came running from somewhere, kicked off the ground, leaped up and clung to my shoulder, then started shouting into my ear. Glancing to the side, I saw all the other members nearby were staring at me. It seemed everyone present was wondering the exact same thing Einar had just blurted out. Well, if someone suddenly becomes a 23-meter giant, it's only natural to be curious about the details. Of course, I'm also in a position where I'd need gradually to figure out the exact mechanics behind how it works, but there was no reason to honestly say that. The people here refer to these kinds of synergies as secret lore and regard them as precious assets beyond compare. No one would say anything even if I just stayed silent. I'll tell you about it later, so get down for now. I grabbed Einar by the scruff of her neck, set her on the ground, and had her stand up straight. Then, using my thumb and index finger, I roughly measured her height and compared it against my own body. It was a crude method, but I managed to roughly figure out my current height. 4.5 Einars. My height is just over 9 meters. It's nothing compared to my previous specs, which more than warranted Einar calling me a giant god, but this is still plenty huge. Above all, I can move freely. Honestly speaking, wasn't I in a state where I couldn't even walk properly earlier without using wild outburst? This state actually felt optimal, but I was curious about just one thing. Why did I become smaller? I was 23 meters before, so why am I 9 meters now? Could it be that some specific condition needs to be met for that supergiant mode to activate? There was little I could figure out immediately. After all, this was my first time using Transcendence since its corruption had finished. Vroom. First, I deactivated giantization, returned to my original state, then tried using giantization again. But it was this, too. Once again, my body grew large enough that the ceiling of the flesh passage brushed against my head, causing an unpleasant sensation. And this time, I hadn't even used Transcendence. To think I'm 4.5 Einars tall in my normal giantization state. Just what has happened to me? How exactly has Transcendence changed? To find that out, I deactivated giantization once again, and you have cast Transcendence I immediately tried using Transcendence, but for some reason, it felt strange. No, to be precise, I felt nothing at all, as if the casting of the skill itself had failed. Your level is insufficient. I also tried using Swing as a test, but Transcendence still remained unresponsive and wouldn't activate. First off, the causes, without needing to look further, the corruption. But looking at it in more detail, did the effect get stronger in exchange for gaining a cooldown? That hypothesis came to mind first, but it didn't make sense. If that were the case, then when I used Giantization a moment ago, it should have been its usual size increase. A permanent enhancement. That was the second hypothesis that came to mind, and the one I felt was most likely. There weren't any particular contradictions, after all, but if that were the case, it's not that it's on cooldown, but that it's in an unusable state to begin with. There's no way it would let me repeat something like this multiple times. I suddenly became curious. What would my other skills have been like? If it had been Swing, that underwent permanent enhancement. If it had been Iron Fortress, if it had been Stake, how would those skills have evolved? A slight sense of regret arose within me at the thought that I might never know that future. But, yeah, this is better. I would have inevitably used Transcendence once I returned to the city later. At that time, what if I had used it on a skill I would someday erase, like Eye of the Storm? I wouldn't have even had time to feel regret like this, because I would have been absolutely fucking pissed. Forgive my rudeness in asking, Viscount Yondell, but what in the world was that earlier? My contemplation, accompanied by a bit of experimentation, came to an end due to Gwalyn's approach. He looked extremely curious, so much so that he was raising his voice in excitement. I've never seen anything like that in all my years, nor have I ever even heard of such a thing. His scholarly curiosity was plain to see, but I just gave a casual shrug. What else would it be? It's secret lore. Why bother explaining the nitty-gritty details about omen of corruption and whatnot when saying secret lore is all it takes to settle things in this world? This is also a world where if you ask about the details, you're considered to be a daylight robber. Perhaps coming to his senses at the word secret lore, Gwalyn calmed his excitement a bit. Secret lore, you say? Yes, I suppose it would be, but it must be a secret lore unique to you, Viscount. If there had been another such person in Reftonia's long history, there surely would have been at least one record of them left behind. Well, that's to be expected. Because the probability is that low, there has probably never been a case of Transcendence becoming corrupted and changing like this before, and it probably won't happen again up until the day Raftonia falls. In any case, congratulations. When you return to the city, you'll probably need to get accustomed to it quickly. Your new nickname. New nickname. When I tilted my head, Gwalyn grinned. Ever since Miss Fenelon mentioned it, all the members have already been calling you that. Well, it's only natural. Even I, having witnessed the spectacle firsthand, can't think of anything more fitting. Then, Gwalyn spoke my new nickname aloud. The giant god, Bjorn Yondell. For some reason, I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. Aside from the fact that it had a nice ring to it, the giant god, giant was still within the realm of human. But now, I far surpassed even that. We are walking through the passageway of flesh. I had deactivated giantization. This place, where Leviathan's phase 4 unfolds, is too cramped a space for a 9-meter tall giant to move around in. From the start, the ceiling had been a height low enough to bend my neck, and as time passed, the passage narrowed further until it became impossible to even walk at that size. This just goes to show that being too big has its own drawbacks. The final part of this raid, the strategy for phase 4 is incredibly simple. All you have to do is pass through the maze-like tangled intestinal passageways, and destroy its heart. It's a kind of time attack section, you could say. As time passes, the passageways narrow and fill up with acidic fluid. Also, the heart you face in the final boss room is extremely tough, and the summoning pattern is very notorious. Of course, none of that matters to us. Having decided to take our beating up front in phase 3, we were ultimately able to enter phase 4 with our last arrow saved. Phase 4 is hardly even worth calling a raid. The way I see it, once we find the boss room, it's over. One hit with the evil destroying arrow, the ultimate holy attribute tag, and this thing would turn into experience points. So, thud, with a somewhat relaxed mind, I tried out various experiments while heading to the boss room, and I confirmed one thing. The passive has been deleted. Transcendence's passive enhancement effect had disappeared. Since Primordial Cell was no longer enhanced, my MP consumption when using Giantization became greater, and my highest stat didn't increase as much as expected. This is a bit of a shame. My highest stat right now is natural regeneration, so what if instead of stopping at 1.5 times, it had been boosted by 2.25 times through Transcendence? With just a few tweaks to my build, I might have been able to break past a 10,000 wall without denial and potentially obtain the immortality bonus. The reconnaissance team reports they've found the heart chamber. Just as my thoughts reached that point, a report came in that the reconnaissance team searching for the way at the front had finally discovered the bus room. Therefore, my musings about my new essence ended there. From then on, I joined the main force as they picked up speed in earnest and headed for the bus room. Thump, thump, thump. The closer we got to the bus room, the faint vibrations traveling through the passageway grew stronger and stronger. By the time we reached the entrance, vibrations were so intense that they resonated in our eardrums. Squelch. Stepping through the acidic fluid and passing through the narrow passageway into the bus room, a vast space opened up. The interior was like the central chamber of an ant colony. The ceiling and floor alike were riddled with large and small passageways, dug out like holes. And, thump, situated at the center was a giant heart, encased in a tough outer layer. At first glance it almost looked like an egg, but it was rhythmically undulating, and as I stood at a distance, watching it for a moment, a female elf approached my side. So that's the famous heart of the sea god. She wasn't someone I was meeting for the first time, because she always attended the leadership meetings, though she spoke so rarely that I'd only heard her voice a few times, let alone had a conversation with her, It seemed like she was trying to start a conversation, but I wasn't sure if she was just muttering to herself, so I didn't say anything. But was she actually trying to talk to me? Are you ignoring me? Was that a question? Yeah, that's the heart of the sea god, I answered belatedly, but she scowled as if displeased. TCH, this is why elves. I'm seriously love Altricia. I know. Well, I probably still can't properly remember her full name, but this woman is the captain of the Purebloods, a position that became vacant when Erwin withdrew, and the sniper for this expedition, though unqualified to shoot the evil destroying arrow. I'm Bjorn, son of Yondel. Anyway, it seemed like she wanted us to properly introduce ourselves even at this point, so I gave my name as a formality, but her response was very elf-like. I know. Geez, how petty. Was she trying to get back at me or something? So what's your business? When I asked bluntly, Altricia furrowed her brow, seemingly displeased about something again. Never mind. My business can wait. Let's talk after we get out of this unpleasant place first. As she said that, she abruptly knocked the arrow to her bowstring. It was an action that couldn't help but make me lose it. Wait, what are you doing? Fulfilling my role. Stop. The wizards aren't done with their preparations yet. Preparations? Why does she look like she's hearing this for the first time? No wonder you were so quiet during the meetings. You weren't paying attention at all, were you? Never mind, just wait. Once the preparations are done, no matter how many arrows you shoot, I won't stop you. Whether my words embarrassed her, Altricia swiftly turned her back without another word and headed toward where the elves were gathered. What's with her? Anyway, a bit more time passed and then Gwalin approached. The preparations you requested are all complete, Lord Viscount. You seem to have something you want to say. Are you truly certain about this? This is no different from a gamble, and one with low odds of success, at that. Yeah, that's true. That's why I'd also agonized over it a lot and came to this difficult decision. I thought we'd settled that discussion a long time ago. I shall abide by the Viscount's will. After that, Gwalin headed to where Altricia was. The two of them seemed to exchange a brief conversation, and then Altricia once again knocked the arrow to her bowstring. Bjorn, can that arrow really kill it in one shot? Naya. Yes, what if it doesn't die? Well, then from that point on, we'd be stuck fighting off monsters pouring out of the holes in this space. Elite monsters with a minimum rank of rank 3. On top of that, because of the setting that they are illusions, they don't even give mana stones or essences when killed. But, don't worry, that won't happen. This time at least, I wasn't worried in the slightest. How can you be so sure? Because I've done it before. Using the evil destroying arrow, it's possible to skip Leviathan's 4th phase. Fwiggish. Released from a perfect stance, the fully drawn bowstring sent the arrow flying toward the heart, and, kwang. The arrow, buried so deep that its fletching was no longer visible, burst as if exploding with a pure white flash. You have killed a Leviathan. EXP +9. Befitting a rank 1 monster, the experience points flowed in as a sense of fulfillment more distinct than ever before. There was no room for doubt. HUU. The raid was a success. Leviathan was dead, but it actually worked. Its corpse did not disappear into particles of light. Neither did the chunks of its heart, split into pieces and scattered like crushed jelly. Nor did the space we were standing in collapse. Thump. So, simply put, the gamble. In other words, the distortion magic had succeeded.